The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Let us pray. Gracious God, creator of the universe, you spoke this entire world into being, and you breathed life into every single person. Everything and everyone that you have created is loved and valued by you. As we gather today, we ask for your guidance as we seek to serve the world, communities, and individuals that you have placed in our care. May your presence be here today among this governing body as they discuss, debate, and decide how to steward the resources that you have entrusted to us. We ask for your blessing on this assembly. May you bless us and keep us. May your light shine on us with grace and mercy. May you look upon us with favor and give us peace. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Pastor Patrick Joyner from Luther Memorial Church in South St. Paul, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House 94th Session 2025, St. Paul, Minnesota, Wednesday, March 12th, 2025.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is on your desk and online. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File number 252.
Second
Second
reading.
reading, House File number 748.
Second
Second
reading.
reading, House File number 787.
Second reading.
reading, House File number 1257.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File number 1723.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File number 1768.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File number 1867.
Second reading.
And second reading, House File number 2159.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 2274 through 2365.
First reading, House Files 2274 through 2365. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
NISCA from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rule 1.21, designates the following bills to be placed on the supplemental calendar for the day for Thursday, March 13th, 2025. House File numbers 550, 1218, 1247, 2131, and 2133.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar today is House File 550. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 550, number 1 on the supplemental calendar for the day, an act relating to the legislature, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, I recognize the member from Brown, the author of the bill, Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 550 is a bill that would establish a redistricting commission for the state of Minnesota.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that House File 550 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 550 be laid on the table. This is a non-debatable motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1218. The chief clerk will report the bill.
File number 1218, number 2 on the supplemental calendar, an act relating to the environment, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, the author of the bill, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is the annual LCCMR bill, which appropriates money out of the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund.
I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And following up on Representative Heintzeman, this is a little more than the annual LCCMR bill. This is the recommendations from the LCCMR plus a completely new community grant program, erasing what was passed last year, what Minnesotans heard when the amendment was being campaigned upon. It creates programs and projects, some projects that were heard by the LCCMR and rejected, other projects that are bonding projects, and projects that have not been vetted. So it is a little more than the annual LCCMR bill, and it would be a good thing to lay on the table.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that House File 1218 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1218 be laid on the table. This is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1247. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1247, number 3 on the supplemental calendar, an act relating to child care, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a bill about child care that allows aides to spend up to 25% of their time with children alone.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1247 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1247 be laid on the table. This is non-debatable. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 2131. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2131, number 4 on the supplemental calendar, an act relating to higher education.
I recognize the author of the bill from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 2131 expands the workforce development scholarships at Minn State to include cybersecurity programs.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 2131 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 2131 be laid on the table. This again is non-debatable. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the supplemental calendar for today is House File 2133. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2133, number 5 on the supplemental calendar, an act relating to taxation, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill from Fillmore, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill has to do with some technical corrections on the pass-through entity tax, and so I'd really appreciate, I'd make the motion to table. I'll make the motion to table 2133.
Representative Davids makes the motion to table House File 2133. Again, that is non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 66. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 66, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to elections, establishing a set filing period for special elections.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, the author of the bill, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this bill is meant to take care of the situation where we recently had effectively 8 hours on New Year's Eve day to file, and I think it's good to have a minimum number of days to file. Thank you.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 66 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 66 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 75. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 75, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy.
I recognize the member from Pope, the author of the bill, Representative Anderson, PH.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill pertains to allowing large hydro to be used to account for Minnesota's non-carbon, low-carbon fuel standard, Madam Speaker.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 75 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 75 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 81. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 81, number 5 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to environment.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, the author of the bill, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill exempts off-highway vehicles, snowmobiles, and e-bikes from the definition of juvenile products that was used in the ban of the sale of juvenile products containing PFAS.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 81 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 81 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 390. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 390, number 6 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to government data practices, the first engrossment.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And House File 390 extends the penalties and remedies in law for violation of the Minnesota Data Practices Act to the Official Records Act.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 390 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 390 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 845. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 845, number 7 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to energy, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Candy, Ohio, the author of the bill, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a net metering bill. It's an important bill to get right for our rural co-ops. It's a good bill. Thank you.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 845 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 845 be laid on the table. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 921. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 921, number 8 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to education finance.
I recognize the member from Morrison, the author of the bill, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just simply a technical bill.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that House File 921 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 921 be laid on the table. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1060. The chief clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1060, number 9 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to state government eliminating the Legislative Commission on Minnesota sports facilities.
I recognize the member from Carver, the author of the bill, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a request from the LCC to eliminate the Legislative Commission on Minnesota sports facilities.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1060 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1060 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1062. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1062, number 10 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to state government.
I recognize the member from Carver, the author of the bill, Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House File 1062, number 10 on the calendar, number 1 in your heart, is again from the request from the LCC to eliminate the Driver and Vehicle Systems Oversight Committee.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1062 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1062 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1382. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1382, number 11 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to the environment.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, the author of the bill, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is an agency bill requested by the Environmental Quality Board that repeals obsolete laws regarding reporting on compliance with state, federal, lead regulators that were due in 1992, so that's going back a ways, and laws regarding silica sand projects that are now incorporated into state rules.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that House File 1382 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1382 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1445. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1445, number 12 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to veterans.
I recognize the member from Beltrami, the author of the bill, Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a simple technical bill referencing veterans' burials. Thank you.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1445 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1445 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is 1496. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1496, number 13 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to elections.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, the author of the bill, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And since we have gone to a permanent mailing out of absentee ballots, that list, this bill just says we should, before we mail it out, verify it's still valid. Thank you.
I recognize Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1496 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1496 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1691. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1691, number 14 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation.
I recognize the member from Dakota, the author of the bill, Representative Kosnick.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. This is a technical changes just for the definitions chapter on motor vehicles.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1691 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1691 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1693. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1693, number 15 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to transportation.
I recognize the member from Dakota, the author of the bill, Representative Kosnick.
Good afternoon again. This makes technical changes to changes in state aid provisions.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1693 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1693 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1052. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1052, number 16 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to education.
I recognize the member from Scott, the author of the bill, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, House File 1052 allows school principals to dismiss students for up to 3 days in grades K through 3.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1052 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1052 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 1491. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1491, number 17 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to education.
I recognize the member from Freeborn, the author of the bill, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Speaker Dameth. This is a technical correction bill that just updates language that was changed in the last legislative session.
Representative Niska.
I move that House File 1491 be laid on the table.
Representative Niska moves that House File 1491 be laid on the table. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 24. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 24, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health, making changes to born alive infant provisions.
I recognize the member from Cass, the author of the bill, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 24 is a very simple bill. This bill provides protections for babies that survive an abortion. This makes clear in state law that all reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice are used to preserve the life and health of these babies. Today, I'm sure we will hear many tragic and heartbreaking stories about families losing babies for a variety of unexpected and unavoidable reasons. These situations are truly awful and devastating, but that's not what this bill is about. Again, House File 24 is about protecting babies that are born alive during an abortion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 24.
Third reading. Discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza Watoon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as a reminder, infanticide is illegal, and doctors already have an obligation to provide appropriate medical care under all circumstances. The language in this bill is a misrepresentation of medical care and will complicate neonatal and postpartum care and bonding time. In the heartbreaking circumstance where a child is to be born incompatible with life, parents are faced with an impossible choice. Often, this diagnosis is made later in pregnancy, and while some parents may choose to terminate that pregnancy, others may choose to carry to term. It can be challenging to know how we may respond or react in any given instance until we're living it. Imagine you and your partner were thrilled to discover you're expecting, looking through baby name books, setting up a registry, painting a nursery. And a few short months later, you receive a fetal diagnosis that is incompatible with life. As an expectant parent, any time you may have with that child is a blessing. And instead of allowing grieving parents to snuggle and soothe that child in those brief moments, the language of this bill would require that doctors instantly whisk your child away for invasive, expensive, and futile medical treatments, robbing you of those first and last moments with your newborn. Members, this language is misleading and it is unnecessary. Please join me in voting no.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So as my colleague said, infanticide is indeed illegal in Minnesota, despite what the right-wing media has been saying for months and months. As our governor was running on a national ticket, there were all kinds of lies about what our laws are here in Minnesota, bald-faced lies. And as the more I've thought about this law, which we repealed 2 years ago and is now, this bill is an attempt to reinstate it, the more I realize what a fraud this law really is. This law was created to demonize doctors and to demonize people who simply want the government out of their most private, personal decisions. That is what this law was about. So members, when you look at the law that actually is now repealed, there was a definition in law of what they meant by born alive infant. And when you read that definition, you realize it was not just the so-called infant that was born alive after an abortion. It was really pretty much every infant. Maybe it was every single infant born. So this whole idea that there are infants born alive after an abortion, this is not something that actually happens. It really doesn't happen. That's just not how this works. And we have an abortion report in the state, and every year the Department of Health reports on the number of abortions in the state. And for many years under the old, now repealed law, they were required to report the so-called born alive infants. And so they would report every year. And I took the time some months ago to actually go through these reports and look at those numbers, because these numbers are often people who support this law often get up and say, but look at all these infants that were reported under this law. Well, guess what? The definition of a born alive infant was such that it included every infant who was born alive with any sort of medical condition, even what Representative Katiza Watun was just talking about. That would have, an infant who was born with a devastating, some kind of devastating condition that would shorten its life, that infant would be considered a born alive infant under this reporting law. But even with all of that, even when this law was in place, there was not one single report. I went through 7 years of these reports very carefully, totaling up and looking at the reports. There was not one single infant reported to be saved under this law. So think about that. Here we had this big law, and it was much more complicated than what's being introduced today, and not one infant was reported being saved. But there were some reports of various kinds of things. So I looked at 2016 to 2022. So there were 19 such reported over 7 years under this law. But that doesn't mean that a single one of those was an infant born alive after an abortion, because that wasn't the definition that was used to write these reports. But what we do see under those reports is that it is still extremely rare to have an abortion late in pregnancy. And in those 7 years, there were only 15 after 24 weeks of gestation in 7 years. So when you look at those reports, because I know somebody's going to get up and say, oh, look at these reports. It says there were infants born alive after abortion. That's not what the reports mean. And that's part of the problem. Under the old law, nobody knew what it meant. So if a doctor decided to report, it was pretty much guesswork that they wanted to report. But not a one of them was a so-called infant born alive after an abortion. But I want to turn your attention to the language of this bill that is before you, because members, if you read this bill, whether you support abortion or don't, look what you're voting for when you vote for this bill. What the law currently says, an infant who is born alive, which is basically all of us, every one of our kids, every infant born alive, shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. And if you vote for this bill, you are voting to take away that protection. What you will be saying is that only an infant who is born alive as the result of an abortion, which is few to none, that only that infant is a person. So let me say this again, just to be very clear. If you vote yes on this bill, you are saying that infants born alive in this state are not people. That's an incredible thing to be voting for. Even if you agree with the rest of the bill, you will be saying that infants born alive in this state are not people. Now, that's the result of how oddly this bill is drafted. That was the choice of the author. It didn't have to be that way, but that's what you've got before you. So think really hard before you vote for this bill, members. This bill deserves a big fat no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Liebling, I think the Department of Health knew darn good and well what the legislature meant when that bill was passed, and that is exactly the data they were keeping. Members, no one, I would hope that no one in this room, and certainly no one back in 2015, thought it was something that was even close to being humane is when a baby survives an abortion to leave it on a cold stainless steel table left to die on its own. We had quite a debate on the passage of the original bill. And we had some interesting people that are still in this chamber on the other side of the aisle that voted for it, one of them being former Speaker Melissa Hortman. Also, over in the Senate at the time, Representative Murphy was in this body, and she voted in favor of it. Members, if we do not have the humanity to save a baby, give life-giving measures to a baby that survives an abortion, what are we doing in this body? Would Representative Engen yield to a question?
Representative Engen will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Engen, I know you have baby Everett. And how many weeks gestation was he born?
Representative Engen.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Scott. He was born at exactly 28 weeks gestational age on the bathroom floor during an emergency at-home birth.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if Representative Engen would yield?
He will yield. Go ahead, Representative Scott.
Thank you. And Representative Engen, I've seen newspaper articles featuring the birth of Everett, and you credit whom for saving his life?
Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Scott. So many people. There were 3 individuals who were instrumental in him being with us today. Josh Perro, an EMT, Sam Bergeron, a Lino Lakes police officer, and Brett McCreevy, who all jumped into the back of an ambulance and whisked him away, to use Representative Liebling's words, and provided that life-saving care. I thought I was holding my stillborn son when I first met him and named him on the bathroom floor in a puddle of blood. Still, it's tough sometimes to go into that bathroom and just use it at all. It was traumatic. But because they acted, they saw that he wasn't breathing. They saw that there wasn't a pulse that they could register. And because they brought him to the hospital, even after 30 minutes of not having oxygen, and they performed that life-saving care, that's why he's here today.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Engen, thank you for answering those questions. I know it's difficult to go through that again, and I know how thankful you are that Everett's with us. And members, so if a baby is 28 weeks gestation and they survive an abortion, no one's going to come to the rescue of that baby under current law. No one's going to come to the rescue of that baby like they did Representative Engen's baby. That okay? I don't think it is. Members, we all know what the intent of this bill is. The Department of Health knew it back when it passed in 2015. Everyone in the state knows what this bill is about. And I don't remember, I think it's in the 84% of people in the state of Minnesota believe that this should be the law. Members, please vote in favor of this bill.
I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Thank you, members. You know what this bill ensures is that all baby lives matter, and that includes babies who survive an abortion. You know, members, I've had the honor of preserving life for 31 years as an EMT. Approximately 4 years ago, a Saturday night, Sunday morning, pager goes off at 3 in the morning, and it was a troubled pregnancy. We got to the scene, of course. Mom and Dad was excited. I was excited. These runs are extremely difficult. You don't get many of these runs. So she had a troubled pregnancy. We got into the rig, and I called baby Z. I was there to assist Mom to give birth to baby Z. It was no bigger than my hand. No bigger than my hand. 21 weeks. I did everything humanly possible to save that baby. And I was praying all the way. That run, which we've gone many times, that would have been my 27th year serving as an EMT. I've gone to the Coteau Prairie Hospital in Sisseton many, many times. And literally that felt like eternity. We did not save that baby. Folks, what this bill does is really simple. This bill changes comfort care to life-preserving care for any baby that is born. Like what I provided in the back of that ambulance to my maximum skill level, providing respirations, providing everything, CPR for that infant, because when it was born, it was not alive. If you look at the bill, it says it changes care for the infant who is born alive to preserve the life and health of a born alive infant from abortion. Babies' lives matter. If it's 3 or 5 or 2 a year, they matter. Just like in the back of that ambulance to Mr. and Mrs. Zemer, it mattered to them that I did all I could to save that baby's life. Afterwards, there was 3 of us on that run. I have never broken down like I did ever in 31 years with that run. Folks, vote yes. This is common sense. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in strong support of this bill.
For years, members, this was the standard of care in our law, supported in bipartisan fashion. I don't even know why it's controversial. If there's an abortion and a baby is born alive, it should be incumbent on us to try to preserve the life of that child. So I encourage us, the language is very clear. I know people have been disputing the language, but if you look at the bill, I have it in front of me, it says a born alive infant as a result of an abortion, so not the kids that are talked about where they are carried to term and have a crisis or a very sad situation where they won't survive. That is not the case that this bill is addressing, even though that circumstance is also very tragic. This is specifically addressing cases where the infant is born alive as a result of an abortion, and that we fully recognize this child as a human person and provide care to preserve the life. Comfort care is not preserving the life, and it's incumbent on us, if a baby is born alive, to try to save their life. They are a fully human child that has that opportunity to live just like Everett has lived, and earlier and earlier medical intervention can make a huge difference. So I hope this is bipartisan, members. This used to be bipartisan. We have strong consensus in the public on this. I hope we can have strong consensus in the chamber. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to revert away from my own story. I told it a couple of times, and frankly, it's still tough for me to talk about, but I want to talk instead about what I saw inside of the NICU for 75 days, just a couple of blocks from here. We saw so many different stories, some like our own, where a mother went into some sort of a traumatic pregnancy and had a baby who was born prior to their due date, who were fighting just like Everett, babies just like Everett who were fighting for life. We saw mothers who were battling substance abuse disorder, who had a baby in the NICU who was withdrawing, and I remember those cries, and those ones stick with you. I heard so many different stories, and we came across so many different people in all walks of life. And I think it's so simple to just make this an abortion issue. I'd like to turn away from that, that conversation alone, and instead reframe this as an issue of when we as a state, when we as a body, when we as people recognize that living, breathing, unique, and perfect life, just like you or I, is worthy of fighting for. And just like my son at 28 weeks was worth fighting for, these babies are worth fighting for. They didn't choose to be in this position. The mom obviously didn't. The father didn't. Nobody is hoping for this. But I watched my son in particular fight for life at 28 weeks without a heartbeat, in extreme and severe hypothermia, without oxygen for 30 minutes. He grasped onto the finger of the firefighter who was traveling in the back of that ambulance with him. And that's fighting for life. I met a mom at the NICU who had twins, and she was battling substance abuse disorder. And one of her babies passed away, and it was tragic. It was heartbreaking. She was right next door to us. We talked with her all the time. Really, really nice human being, and it was a sad ordeal. And they fought for both of those lives before coming to the conclusion that the son was not going to make it. And I watched a funeral occur no more than 10 yards away from me. And I watched that mom hold that baby for the last time. And it was obvious that she didn't want to be in that position. It was obvious that she knew that she was losing a loved one. But before that occurred, even though it's sad, that was an experience that both that baby and that mom had together. It was all too short-lived that they got to feel each other's warm embrace and see each other's faces, but it was nonetheless just as powerful as any other life. And when I see a bill like this with 17 years of bipartisan support, more, this isn't about abortion, guys. It isn't. It's about stories like those and saying instead of just reverting to that easy fix, that comfort care abortion, we're going to say, oh, this isn't going to work out. Let's just set it on this table. That we're going to first fight. That we're going to allow that baby to fight. This should be a full green board, guys. We can have abortion debates later on different bills, whatever. I mean, it's the debate to end all debates, but this one shouldn't be a debate at all. This is about the protections of humanity and civil rights in every case, just like if something were to happen to us. So thank you.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a very personal subject and issue. Last biennium, I shared with this body my son, Seth. So you know, those who are here, you know how personal this is for me. And I think it's personal for all of us, honestly. We could all come up with something that would make it personal for us, this subject that we're debating here right now. But I can't believe what I heard earlier from the corner in that room, that somehow voting green for this bill, it was explained it's going to do the opposite of what the bill actually says. Heard words that said, what a fraud this bill is. This bill protects the lives of human beings, little baby boys and little baby girls. That's what this bill does. We all need to have a heart in this room this afternoon. A born-alive infant, as the result of an abortion, shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. A baby boy or a baby girl who survives an abortion outside the womb, breathing with a heartbeat, that's what this bill does. It protects baby boys and baby girls. And I got to tell you, you got to spin things pretty good to say, oh, that's actually what you'll be voting against if you vote yes on this bill. HF 24 ensures that babies born alive during abortion are given life-saving care. That's what this bill does. And that board should be lit up green. I want to speak with a heart of compassion about this issue, and I believe we all do. But I'm confounded by what I heard just moments ago. And I've been speaking with members one-on-one on that side of the aisle, pleading with you to join us in protecting life. All you got to do is read the bill, read the plain language of the bill. Last session, when this chamber and the neighboring chamber and Governor Walz legalized abortion up to the point of birth, and yes, I know that's not what we're debating tonight. We also took away that language that protects these babies. And this used to be a bipartisan issue. And it can be a bipartisan issue once again tonight. Minnesota did not want that. I'm going to share with you some survival stories. Claire Caldwell survived an abortion attempt when her 13-year-old mother went to a clinic while 5 weeks pregnant with twins. The attempt on her life killed her twin sibling but missed Claire, who continued to grow undetected. Weeks later, her mother returned for a second attempt. Born alive at 30 weeks, weighing 3 pounds, 2 ounces, she suffered a dislocated hip and clubbed feet from trauma. She was adopted by a loving family. Claire discovered her survival story at 21 years of age when she met her birth mother. She says she was coerced into having an abortion, and she didn't know that Claire had lived. Her mother expressed regret. You want to know what Claire did? Claire expressed love and compassion. Thank God Claire's life mattered. Gianna Jessen survived a saline abortion attempt. Her 17-year-old mother sought the procedure at Planned Parenthood when she was 7.5 months pregnant. 7.5 months pregnant. Her medical records note this: born during saline abortion. Because she lacked oxygen during the attempt, left her with cerebral palsy. Because she lacked oxygen during the attempt, it left her with cerebral palsy. She calls it a tremendous gift. A tremendous gift. She received life-saving care, weighing in at only 2.5 pounds at birth. What a story of a champion. What a story of a mighty woman. Here's what she had to say. She describes surviving 18 hours in the saline solution and credits her survival to divine intervention, saying, "Death did not prevail over me, and I am so thankful." You want to know why? Because her story, Gianna's story, is that she would rather exist than not exist. She walks with a limp and has had years of therapy, but she ran a marathon. Pretty cool. What a champion. What an inspiring story. She goes around now speaking about her story, emphasizing compassion and forgiveness. A story close to home, Minnesota's own Michaela Clay, who testified. Michaela was born alive during a failed abortion attempt. The procedure took place late in the pregnancy, and Michaela was far enough along to survive. It was a failed vacuum. A vacuum aspiration procedure. She was born alive. She was born alive. Her mother panicked and left baby Michaela right there with her older brother in the waiting room. Michaela was then taken to a hospital. She struggled to survive without immediate medical intervention. They did get her to a hospital, but she had underdeveloped lungs. It's led to lifelong breathing difficulties for her. But you know what? She's grateful to be alive. She's grateful for the care that she did get. These are the stories, and there's many more, there's a lot more. These are the stories that are directly related to what we are trying
to put in statute tonight. From 2015 to 2022, 24 babies in Minnesota survived an abortion. Oh, but yet we didn't know the definition of that. Doctors didn't know how to define that. Well, doctors are pretty smart. Doctors are pretty smart. 24 babies in Minnesota survived an abortion from 2015 to 2022. Those are the facts. And I've even heard this argument, well, that's not that many. One's worth it. The number one is worth it. Our chaplain for the day, I loved his prayer. He mentioned that everyone in this room is created by God and loved by God. I believe that with all my heart. And I believe with all my heart that these children have a unique destiny ordained by the living God, never to be written again. And that destiny begins here on earth, and we dare not snuff it out. Let's light up that board with the color green, the color of life.
I recognize a member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I've heard this argument so many times. The doctor's going to whisk the baby away, and it's going to be hooked up to machines, and the mom is not going to have time to bond with that child. Members, she's having an abortion. She didn't want that baby in the first place. So do you think if that baby is born alive, that mom is going to say, I just want to hold the baby. I want to comfort the baby. That mom planned to discard that baby like trash. Kill it in the womb and throw it in the garbage. That mom is not going to be very happy that that baby was born alive. We have got to stop We have to stop twisting the facts around. This is about babies that are born through adoption or abortion. That mom did not want to put that baby up for adoption. That mom wanted to kill the baby inside the womb, toss it in the garbage, and forget it happened. That's how that mom was dealing with the responsibility of being pregnant. Killed in the womb, tossed in the garbage, and oh, the baby's now alive. That mom doesn't want to provide life-saving care. That mom does not want to hold the baby. But we have to believe that life is precious, and no matter how that baby is born, deserves a shot at life. It is not garbage. You cannot set babies aside to die. And that's what that mother wants to do. And that's what appears Democrats, again, want to do here. Baby's born alive through abortion, didn't really want the baby, we're just going to let it die. That's wrong. That is murder. That is infanticide. We are better than that. We are better than letting babies die on a table, on a cold, cold table. That's what this bill is about. This bill is about saying life has value no matter how you are born. If it's in the case of Representative Engen's baby's traumatic entry into this world, or if it's through a mother that chose to have abortion and that baby makes it out of the womb alive. We have heard testimony from individuals that were born via abortion that were meant to die in the womb, that are alive today because of life-saving care. Minnesota should not ever be a state where we say, if you have an abortion and that baby is born alive, don't worry, it's still going to die. You're not going to have to deal with it. That mom doesn't want that baby, and that's why we have adoption, and that is why we have foster care. But first, we have to save that baby's life, because every child has potential, no matter how they're born. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
So for a debate that's not about abortion, a lot of what you guys had to say was about abortion. And we're here to debate House File 24, which actually is a pretty simple bill. And I want to start out my response here by just reminding you of what current law says. It says, an infant who is born alive shall be fully recognized as a human being and accorded immediate protection under the law. That's an infant. However they're born, if they're born alive, the law says they're a person and accorded immediate protection under the law. And then it says, all reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to care for the infant who is born alive. There is nothing in current law that would allow an infant, however born, to be left on any tables and abandoned. The law says they have to receive care that's consistent with medical principles, appropriate medical care by a responsible medical professional. So if some infant is left somewhere to die, that is clearly malpractice. It might even be criminal. It is not allowed under current law. So all of the gnashing of teeth about how we're leaving infants to die is fraudulent. That is not what we have ever done. No one here has ever condoned anything of the sort. I do want to just respond, I want to respond to a number of things. One is, I'll start with the last comment about these mothers who want to get rid of their child or all of that. You know, a lot of times, people who have abortions later in pregnancy do it because there's a problem. If you have a child with a really serious problem or something happens in the pregnancy, and pregnancy, I hope you all realize, is an extremely dangerous time. There can be extremely dangerous things that happen to women's health. The pregnant woman can become very seriously ill and can need to have an abortion to save her very life. So this sort of picture of what it means when someone has an abortion is not accurate. So to say that someone even would have an abortion and then not want to hold their child while it passes, maybe it has a very serious fetal anomaly that's incompatible with life, and they had to have it delivered early by whatever means so that they would actually live to have another pregnancy maybe, that mother may very well want to hold that baby. So this picture of what this is just not true. It's just not true, and it's very unfair to people who've had these really critical things happen. Representative Engen said this shouldn't be a debate at all. You know, Representative Engen's son, as I understand it, was born under current law after we repealed this measure. And I'm very glad to hear that things went okay and that that baby was revived. And, you know, we all should want families to, you know, have the absolute ability to have care that's appropriate for an infant, whatever that infant may need. That is wonderful. Nobody is taking that away. And under current law, which you all are repealing today, any infant born alive is a person. You're limiting that definition to say that it's only an infant who's born alive after an abortion, and the rest of them are no longer in the definition. That is why you should all be voting red on this bill. I don't know, so I know that Representative Scott said no one comes to the rescue. Again, under current law, the infant is owed care. There is no abandonment under current law. That would be malpractice. That would probably be criminal conduct. And Representative Backer, I've heard you tell the story before about saving a baby as an EMT, and I would just say that's wonderful. And EMTs have a different obligation. They need to, right away, try to save any life. They're sent there to save a life, and they need to do that. And that is not anything that this bill is contrary to, as the current law is contrary to. But again, when you vote for this bill, you are taking away the current law that says that every infant is a person and entitled to care. And it's care that is appropriate for that person, which very much could include care to maintain life and health. It absolutely could, and most of the time it probably will. But in those instances where the family doesn't want that baby to have tubes stuck down its throat or any of those things, maybe knows that it's going to be born incompatible with life, this gives the option for that. So I persist in saying, you know, I respect the fact that you all feel very strongly about abortion. We're not going to convince anybody here on the topic of abortion. Everybody already has how they feel about it. And those of us on this side of the aisle, Democrats, by and large, these days believe that government should get out of those decisions. We believe that people are capable of making their own intimate decisions, that every pregnancy is different, that we shouldn't stereotype people because their life experiences really vary and their experience of pregnancy can vary. And what we see in the states that are banning abortions is women are literally dying because they have a pregnancy where they absolutely need an abortion for their own life and health, and they cannot get it. And that is the problem with having the government make your decisions for you, is we cannot legislate people's personal lives. All of you who are for freedom, 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 it is a value we should all share. But apparently, all of us don't share it when it comes to people making their own personal, intimate decisions. So members, I could obviously talk about this for a long time. This idea that infants are being left somewhere is a fraud. That is not happening. If it's happening, it is already illegal. If you want to retain in law that every infant in this state who is born alive shall be fully recognized as a human being and accorded immediate protection under the law, that is what current law says. This bill changes it. You must vote no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 24 is a crucial bill that seeks to restore and strengthen protections for infants born alive following an abortion procedure. Of course, every infant born alive any other way is fully recognized as human. That's why we have homicide laws. But we need clarity when it comes to infants born after the decision to undergo an abortion has been made. And House File 24 ensures that any such infant is fully recognized as a human being and granted immediate legal and medical protections. This legislation affirms our ethical and moral responsibility as a society to provide medical care for all individuals, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. For many Minnesotans, it may be difficult to believe that a bill like this is necessary. Of course, every living, breathing infant should receive the same legal and medical protections as everyone else. So it's unfortunate that this legislation is necessary. It's necessary because in 2023, Democrats and Governor Walz eliminated that long-standing bipartisan protection for infants who survive abortion attempts. As we heard today, both DFL caucus leaders, when they were members of the House, voted for this legislation. It is sad that it is no longer broadly supported bipartisan legislation. And the removal of those compassionate, humane, and widely supported safeguards left millions of Minnesotans shocked and deeply concerned when Democrats did it in 2023, and millions of Americans learned about it in 2024 during the presidential campaign, and they were rightly shocked and concerned as well. So today, we have the opportunity to restore those protections, ensuring that our laws once again reflect fundamental principles of human decency. This bill affirms a simple but profound truth. Infants are infant brothers and sisters who survive an abortion are living human beings, and they deserve the same rights, the same medical attention, the same legal protection as any other person. Supporting House File 24 is a reaffirmation of our shared values, compassion, dignity, and respect for life, and I urge all of you to support this vital legislation. Restore the protections these vulnerable infants, these precious human beings, rightfully deserve. Please vote green.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. Wow. I just want to start with a quote. If this law saves one life, then that's good enough. That was said last year by Governor Tim Walz. Today we are faced with a simple but critical question. Do we as lawmakers, do we believe that every baby born has the right to live? House File 24 is not about politics. This is not about partisanship. It's about whether we will protect the most vulnerable among us, newborn babies, regardless of how they come into this world. This bill ensures that any infant born alive, including after a failed abortion, is given the same medical care and intervention that any other newborn would receive. That's it. That's all. We are not debating abortion today. The choice has already been made. The baby survived by the grace of God, and now we're asking to protect that baby. That's it. House File 24 makes it clear in law that every baby deserves that right. This is not controversial. This shouldn't even be up for debate. It wouldn't be up for debate if we didn't pass House File 91 last year, 2 years ago. We've heard that this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. Well, if that's true, Representative Liebling, if this doesn't happen, let's just make sure that it can't happen. Let's just make sure. This is our opportunity. Let's make sure it can't happen. We've also heard that no medical professional would deny life-saving care to a baby that was born alive. Well, if that's true, then why are you fighting so hard against it? If they're already going to do it, then let's just make it clear in law that they have to. I ask each of you, from the depths of my soul, regardless of what party we are, regardless of how we feel about abortion, let's protect these babies. Let's protect these 3 to 5 babies that are born alive during an abortion every year in our state. Members, today is Redemption Day. This is our opportunity to right a past wrong. Please join us in voting to protect those babies that are born alive during an abortion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 66 nays, the bill is not passed. The next bill on the calendar for today is House File 25. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 25, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to health.
There are amendments at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendments. I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today, House File 25 is really a simple common sense bill. Can you hear me now? Okay. House File 25 is a supporting women bill, and it's a very simple bill. And I agree with the statement that Representative Liebling stated, that people want the government out of their most personal decisions. This bill, members, from 2006 to 2023, for 17 years, let that sink in, 17 years. There was bipartisan support. There was a vote to establish positive alternative grants in 2005. Do you know what the vote was in this House chamber? 112 to 17. 89% bipartisan support, and some members are still here on the other side of the aisle that voted in this 89% bipartisan support. In 2023, House Democrats had the majority and chose to end 2 long-standing options for women. 2 options. What are they? Pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes. What changed? I agree. Women still want the right to have government out of their most personal decisions, and they still want it today. They still want choices, and in order to have options, they simply need all 3 choices. Members, this is an issue where 80% of Minnesotans, regardless of party, believe that this is the right thing to do. And that's why it happened for 17 years. Let's go back to offering 3 options for true choice, like legislators before us did, in a bipartisan manner. Women deserve to have 3 choices. They need options to have choices, or they're simply really take the word choice out, because there's not choice. The word choice implies there are options. And members, that's exactly what this bill does. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Her moves to amend House File number 25, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In Representative Zalesnikar's words, as in her opening, she stated that this bill is about choice. The employees of these facilities should not be prevented from giving pregnant people the choice of necessary health care, such as abortion care. The A5 amendment strikes out the choice-limiting language, and so if you are for choice, you'll be voting green on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the amendment, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The reality is, abortions are funded. That's not what this bill is about. This bill is all about restoring the other options that were cut 2 years ago, which is pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes. I urge you to vote no.
Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do request a roll call. Again, if you look at the language
A roll call being requested. I see 15 hands. There will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam
Representative
Speaker.
Herr.
If you look at lines 2.16 to 2.25, this language specifically restricts these employees and facilities from giving people option. Again, as Representative Zalesnikar stated, this is about choice. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Ryer moves to amend House Law number 25, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a simple amendment. It requires that before providing services to a client, a woman's pregnancy center receiving a grant under this section must inform the client whether there are any licensed medical professionals on site. This is to ensure that people who seek services at these locations, which are often made to appear to be healthcare facilities, to have accurate information about whether or not they will be able to receive their care from a qualified medical professional. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize Representative Zalesnikar.
Members, I ask you to reject this amendment for the simple reason that this isn't something that's done right now. On the other side of the aisle, when we have money going to Planned Parenthood, and the reality is that this amendment is not what we're talking about. It's not what's necessary.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Ryer moves to amend her amendment to House File number 25 as follows. The amendment to the amendment is coded A10.
I recognize the author of the amendment to the amendment, Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I forget, I'd like to request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment to the amendment makes the posting requirement more specific. It requires that a crisis pregnancy center receiving funding from the state must display a sign at their facility saying, "No licensed medical professional on site," when no such staff member is on site. This is to address that frequently the crisis pregnancy centers do not have a licensed medical professional on site. A national 2021 analysis reports that only 16% said they had a physician and 25% said they had a registered nurse affiliated with their staff. In Minnesota, these figures were even lower, with only 9% saying they had an MD and 20% RNs. Many of them are part-time and or volunteers, and they may be licensed in an unrelated specialty. At the time this research was conducted, at least one crisis pregnancy center's medical professional was an optometrist. So I think it's important to be transparent, to give the people who are seeking care at these facilities the information they need to make an informed choice. This is about being honest with people who are seeking the services, and I ask you all to support it.
Is there discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, let's be honest. We all know that there's no licensing for Planned Parenthood, like there's no licensing for resource centers or maternity homes. We all know there's no posting at Planned Parenthood, and there's no requirement on the other side. So let's be clear. This is ridiculous, and the licensing doesn't exist for either setting, never has. That's the fact. Members urge you to vote no.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment to the amendment is not adopted. To the underlying amendment. Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I ask for a roll call on the amendment.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be brief. I think this just makes sense to be fair to the people who are seeking services at an important, vulnerable time of their life. They go in with an assumption that they're going to receive medical care. Often there is no medical profession. Please support the amendment.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Gomez moves to amend House Law number 25, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A7.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the A7 amendment to House File 25 is really about precision in language. It's important in our work that we say what we mean and that the things that we put in statute actually describe what they're purporting to describe. So the A7 changes the name of House File 25 from the Supporting Women Act to the Misleading Women Act. So as you heard Representative Rarick talk about, crisis pregnancy centers go to great pains to make themselves appear to be medical clinics. If you walk into one of them, they feel exactly like a clinic. There's a little desk. There's some seating. There's usually like some old people magazines sitting there. Somebody with scrubs checks you in and they give you paperwork to fill out. And they're called things like care centers, resource centers, pregnancy centers, women's centers. There's one in Crystal that's not a clinic, that's a crisis pregnancy center that's called the Crystal Women's Clinic. They advertise on the outside of these things, free pregnancy tests, free ultrasounds. So someone who walks into one of these things has every reason to believe that they're going to come into contact with legitimate medical care from a legitimate medical professional. So when I went into one of these things, when I think I was 18, I might have been 19, it was that summer that I turned 19. I was greeted at the desk by a woman wearing pink, I wear like pink or lavender scrubs. If you're a woman and you've been to a women's clinic, they have like the special lady scrubs. So she had the lady scrubs on and a stethoscope around her neck. We went back into the back room, and I thought, since I was in a place that looked and felt like a clinic, that I was going to get a pregnancy test that was like a lab-confirmed, legitimate pregnancy test. And instead, what I was handed was an over-the-counter pregnancy test, available 2 for $1 at Dollar Tree. I went and I took the test, and we sat there. I was across the table from this woman. And she just kept asking me, what are you gonna do if you're pregnant? Telling me how wonderful, she was a mom, sharing, some of stories of her own about her kids, which I thought was weird because I hadn't had like a nurse say something like that to me before, but it didn't exactly register at the time. And the pregnancy test was negative. I was in college at the time. The CPC that I went to was right, basically by the U of M, like in the area where college students all live, which is very common for these things to be placed in communities like that, where there would have been a lot of young women like me who were in a situation like I was in, where I wasn't sure if I was pregnant. So it told me that my pregnancy test was negative. And that was wrong. I was pregnant. And weeks passed. And so I was not supported by this fake clinic. I was deceived by them. I was misled. I was deceived and misled by an organization that I had every reason to believe was legitimately a medical clinic, and that I had every reason to believe was staffed by a credentialed medical professional. And giving people false information about something as important as whether they're pregnant or not, or any medical information, can be it can be a fraught thing. It can lead to bad outcomes. If somebody doesn't know they're pregnant, there are things you're not supposed to do when you're pregnant that they could do. So the deception and the misleading practices of these organizations are not incidental. They're core to their mission. Misleading and deceiving women who are in a difficult situation is core to the mission of these organizations. And so we should call them by their names. And so in the interests of precision of language, I would encourage a green vote on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion, Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I would request a roll call.
Representative Nash has requested roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I couldn't disagree more. I've spoken to a lot of folks around these pregnancy centers, and is it misleading, I'll ask you, to educate women on the use of car seats if they choose to keep the baby? It is not. Is it misleading to teach them about breastfeeding and what's going to happen down the road? It is not. Is it misleading to teach them how to use formula or swaddling or how to find assistance now that they're going to be a mother? It is not misleading. Is it misleading on how to find assistance now that you've gone through this brand new thing? No, it is not. Is it misleading to talk to a new mom about how to help your baby get to sleep because it's a brand new thing to them? No, it is not. Is it misleading on how to find housing if you may not get to stay in the house that you are in? It is not misleading. Is it misleading in telling them this most important thing, that it is okay to keep the baby if it's your choice? That is not misleading. So I reject the premise of this amendment. It is not misleading to help a person who is trying to figure out which way is up. It is not misleading at all, and I'm glad that we have these places. It is important that we have these places because a lot of these young women who are going in there, they may have been kicked out of their house and they don't know what to do. These places are helping them out. Reject this amendment, members. Vote red.
Representative Zalesnikar.
Madam Speaker, members, fake and deceived are pretty strong words. Happens to be Women's History Month. I stand here and think, wow, How did Minnesota all of a sudden think that women are so naive that we're going to become this paternalistic state to tell them what they're going to think, where they're going to go, and they're not wise and smart enough to know? No, it's not a licensed facility, and it doesn't say that. It doesn't say it at Planned Parenthood, and it doesn't say it at a pregnant resource center. It says resource center. They're not licensed. Neither one of them are licensed. So let's just be clear. And when we're telling people what we're expecting to have, this bill simply provides 3 options for women. That is what supporting women is. So I think women in Minnesota find a misleading Women Act pretty ironic. Because here's the deal, folks. We lost 2 choices 2 years ago. Do women know that? This bill is designed to support women, and members, I vote you to support women and to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the author of the bill has said numerous times, alluding that people at Planned Parenthood are not licensed medical professionals. It's just not the truth. I want to just correct that for the record. The body voted against an amendment to make sure that clients, patients who are coming to these facilities know whether or not that there are licensed medical professionals on board. The body voted against that. But at Planned Parenthood, the licensed medical professionals are just that. And I just needed to get that on the record. Thank you.
Further discussion, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. These facilities are unregulated. They are passing themselves off as medical facilities. You can read off what the intent of them is all that you want. But if you haven't been in one, in a hard situation, and gone through that process, believing, based on it looking and quacking like a duck, thinking that it is a medical facility, then, words on a page are one thing. But in practice, these facilities do not provide medical attention. They are not regulated by the state. Your personal data is not protected in them because there is no requirement that there's a medical professional on site. HIPAA protections are not in place. Please vote green.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bierman moves to amend House File Number 25, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A8.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as my colleagues have expressed in committee and here on the House floor today, it is abundantly clear that we need regulation in this space. Unregulated clinics can often not only be misleading, but incredibly dangerous. The A8 amendment is a starting step, giving some oversight authority to the Commissioner of Health to evaluate the health impacts of these centers, establishing some basic privacy protections, and saying that we are not going to provide state dollars to unregulated clinics when there are real, legitimate healthcare providers struggling to stay afloat. Members, I ask for a yes vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Zalesnikar.
Madam Speaker and members, I ask members to vote no for this. The reality is that neither setting in the comment that was just made of unregulated clinics. These are not clinics. We have licensed professionals that work in the clinics, but they are not licensed clinics in the same way that you would have in a medical facility. So, members, I urge you to vote no.
Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Bierman has requested a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, licensed personnel in the clinics is the difference between these centers and other centers. Regulation by the Department of Health. These are all important things on oversight. We tried to fix this bill in committee, and we're trying again today to no avail. Members, please vote green on the amendment.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Purcell moves to amend House File number 25. The second engrossment. The amendment is coded A9.
I recognize the member from Rice, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A9 amendment instead directs money to the Sexual and Reproductive Health Services grants, of which we've also been funding at the state for some time. The Sexual and Reproductive Health Services grants, this fund offers affordable access to family planning services and medically accurate information across the state. Every dollar spent on sexual and reproductive health saves the public $7. What a deal. In Minnesota, 37% of rural counties have no publicly funded sexual health clinic location in the county itself, requiring residents who need low-cost or no-cost health care to travel greater distances to receive it than their peers in the metro. Through outreach and education activities such as the small grant classes and health fairs, the SRHS grantees reached 91,165 individuals across the state with medically accurate information about sexual and reproductive health, as well as where to access more comprehensive health care services if needed. This amendment, should we adopt it, will make our money go further, and I encourage, I have a request for a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I request a green vote.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, members, I request a no vote. The bill is to establish funding for pregnancy resource centers and the maternity homes. Funding for the representative's amendment is already existing and has existed. We're returning to fund resource centers and maternity homes, which existed for 17 years. That's what this bill is doing. I urge you to vote no.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To my knowledge, I think the crisis pregnancy centers that the underlying bill purports to support, when we revoked our funding from the state level, I think they're all still in existence. They've got private funding, and we did not fund the maternal homes previously. But I want to just give some quick stats. The We Are Clinic provides the only family planning services in a 60-mile radius serving 800 patients per year in Crow Wing County. Providing affordable family planning services is important in these rural areas where transportation, stigma, poverty, and lack of insurance may be more pronounced. And more than 65% of their patients fall under 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. One more fun fact that might get you to vote green for my amendment. In 2023, all of these clinics that received the SRHS grant funding, they screened 16,000 clients for chlamydia. Chlamydia is the most prevalent STI. It's an epidemic around the US and Minnesota. And this funding is important because it increases access to affordable testing, treatment, risk reduction, counseling. And this outreach work allows clinics to serve populations who are most at risk. While 15 to 19-year-olds make up 6.5% of the population, they make up over 25% of the cases in Minnesota. So let's support this great work these clinics are doing, and please, I encourage a green vote on the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 67 nays, the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 25.
Third reading. Further discussion. I recognize the member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as we're discussing this today, and I want to thank Representative Zalesnikar for bringing this bill through the House. It's an important thing, and it was very discouraging to see this body strip out this funding. When we talk about being pro-choice, choice, the definition is the act of making a selection when you are presented with multiple possibilities. And unfortunately, this body in 2023 made it a #1 priority to move abortion all the way to 40 weeks and to strip all other options financially that were given to something like a pregnancy center. Choice means something. It means that there's more than one choice. I was actually quite shocked to see these amendments that were brought forth. And it's concerning to me to see the demonization that's happening in this chamber of pregnancy centers, especially knowing that most people in the public do not believe this same way that you do. I ask you, members, we have many instances. Let's just take teaching. One teacher makes a dire mistake, they're in the news. Does that, and if you take 100 teachers, does that make all teachers bad? One police officer makes a mistake, and does that make all law enforcement bad? You know, as I heard Representative Gomez say, it sounded like she had a traumatic experience at a pregnancy center, and that's unfortunate, and I truly feel bad for anyone that did. Members, it is wrong to demonize pregnancy centers across the board, and I think you need to check your hearts on this one. I think you need to go visit them. You need to see what they're doing there. They have been stripped of all funding from our state. They fundraise. My husband sits on a board of a pregnancy center, and I can guarantee you nothing that was stated on the other side, from people coming to the door dressed in scrubs to wearing a stethoscope and pretending to be a medical professional, none of that is happening. And perhaps you should visit one. They fundraise. They support women. They educate. The clinic in Red Wing, if someone takes a class on parenting, they earn points and they can get things like diapers for their children. They can get formula. It supports mothers, it supports families, it supports children. I thought you were pro-choice. Again, if there was one bad thing that happened at a clinic, that is unfortunate, and I would feel bad and apologize. I would never want that to happen to anyone. But this rhetoric that just happened in this chamber and these amendments were literally slanderous on these pregnancy centers and the good work that they do across Minnesota. On one of the amendments, you said that we should make them a pro-choice center. Well, I spoke to someone who went to a Planned Parenthood clinic, and she had not made up her mind. She asked to have an ultrasound. Planned Parenthood did not do that for her. Planned Parenthood did not give her options. You want to talk about pro-choice? You want to offer an amendment saying that pregnancy centers should offer every choice? Planned Parenthood isn't doing that. The irony. I talked to another one that she said she cried in the waiting room of Planned Parenthood because she didn't know. And they escorted her out. Apparently, a mother who is not choosing to kill her baby is not welcome at Planned Parenthood. So the irony of you to say that we should have pro-choice, the irony is so demeaning to every organization that does good. We should be celebrating families. We should be supporting mothers. We should be supporting fathers. We should be doing everything possible to help them have a healthy baby through their pregnancy, to give them a good start. And that's what pregnancy centers in Minnesota do. That's what pregnancy centers in Minnesota do. I don't know why you're so hateful with pregnancy centers. I don't know why you don't want to give a choice to a mother who is crying at Planned Parenthood to go to another clinic to have an ultrasound to find out that it is a baby. I don't know why you don't want to give them that choice. But if you don't want to give them that choice, then take choice out of your name, because you are not the party of pro-choice anymore. Members, Representatives Lesnicar supported our clinics, and no matter how you try to demonize these clinics, they will continue on. They will fundraise, they will support mothers, they will support families. And maybe, just maybe, you should go visit one.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. This bill is part of an ongoing and dangerous trend of dedicating public funds to crisis pregnancy centers. And I have visited pregnancy centers, and they are not as described by the other side of the aisle. I have also visited Planned Parenthoods for a variety of reasons, and in fact, they do offer a huge number of choices, and they sit down with folks and they ask them how they would like to proceed. So I really balk at the characterization that that is not provided. That is not fair. I've heard a lot about demonizing pregnancy centers, and I want to make sure that it is on the record that giving public funds to organizations that are offering nothing but deception and manipulation is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. Crisis pregnancy centers are organizations that seek to intercept women with unintended pregnancies who might be considering an abortion and prevent those people from accessing contraception. They like to give the impression that they are clinical centers, that they have legitimate medical services and advice, and yet they are exempt from regulatory, licensure, and credentialing oversight that apply to healthcare facilities. Please note, we are not looking to take away public funding for healthcare facilities. You want choice? You can go to a healthcare facility. Many of them are subsidized by the state, by insurance. There is access to real medical care and advice. That is what we want to make sure we are providing to people. The ideology of these centers, owners, and employees take priority over the health and well-being of women seeking care at these centers. Women do not receive comprehensive, accurate, evidence-based clinical information about all the available options. I'm hearing stories about one person's experience in a center and another person's experience in a center, but the thing is, I like data, and there was a study that was done, and that study shows that pregnancy centers outnumber abortion clinics in Minnesota by 11-1, and most of these centers don't provide comprehensive reproductive health care. In fact, only 20% of them have registered nurses on staff, and only 9% claim to have a physician on staff. When we are talking about women who are pregnant, who possibly didn't know they were pregnant, you need to have people who know what they are doing coaching you through that system. It's not enough to have somebody who just likes babies. It's not a daycare center. They're not babysitters. We're asking them for healthcare advice. And when you're asking somebody for healthcare advice, I want to make sure that they are licensed and that they know what they are doing. We have a responsibility, not just to birthing people, but to our society as a whole, to ensure that resources are being used to actually help, to truly provide care and support and options that empower women to make informed decisions about their futures. Crisis pregnancy centers are an egregious misallocation of funds. They do not serve women in the way they claim. They serve a narrow ideological agenda that often does more harm than good. Minnesotans should be trusted to make what should be private healthcare decisions in consultation with a medical provider. They deserve to be given accurate information and a full range of medical options. We cannot use public funds to restrict, control, or manipulate the information provided to pregnant women. Now, if you really want to help women, I have some bills for you. Comprehensive sex education to prevent unwanted or unplanned pregnancies before they even happen. Requiring insurance to cover all forms of over-the-counter birth control. Funding pregnancy centers that focus on postnatal care for Black and brown women and their babies. Those are women who have significantly higher risk of dying during birth or shortly thereafter. Requiring maternal health, death, and morbidity studies. Making critical investments in social determinants of health that influence maternal health outcomes like housing, transportation, and nutrition. And dedicating funding to grow and diversify the perinatal workforce to ensure that every mom in Minnesota receives maternal health care and support from the people they trust. Those are things that will really help women. Those are investments that we can make. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't note that according to a 2019 Minnesota Department of Health study, Black mothers giving birth in Minnesota are twice as likely to die of pregnancy complications than their white counterparts. Twice as likely. Black Minnesotans only make up 13% of the birthing population, and yet they represent over 26, almost 27% of pregnancy-associated deaths. And Native Americans only make up 1.7% of our population, but represent 12% of the deaths. There's a real problem here, a problem that is not being addressed by crisis pregnancy centers. If we truly care about pregnant people, if we are truly pro-life, the life of unborn fetuses and the life of all humans, we absolutely need to stop funneling public funds into deceptive organizations that do nothing but harm and start investing in real solutions. You all know that we have limited resources right now, and we need to use them to build a system that gives individuals the opportunity to make informed decisions, to have their needs met, and to live their lives with dignity, freedom, and respect. Imagine if we took all the money being funneled into crisis pregnancy centers and instead dedicated it to organizations that help women. Think about the impact of funding real comprehensive health care clinics that provide prenatal care, postnatal care, family planning, full reproductive health centers. Imagine the difference we could make by investing in shelters, food programs, and social services that provide a lifeline to women who need support when faced with an unplanned pregnancy. Imagine the positive changes we could create by investing in mental health resources to help women navigate complex, emotional, and overwhelming choices they face without the pressure of manipulation. Just imagine what we could do. Please vote no.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hollins, thank you for that. That's where I wanted to center this conversation about crisis pregnancy centers. Starting off from a point where we do all agree that women, those who can become pregnant in our state of Minnesota, should receive the best possible medical care, medical advice, especially if they find themselves in an unplanned situation. And the real question is, what is the best use of our public funds to achieve those ends? That's what 25 is talking about. And specifically, whether these crisis pregnancy centers, as they call them, are the best use for grants from the state, from the taxpayers of Minnesota, to achieve those ends. So as I was pondering this situation this afternoon, I Googled here at the Capitol, crisis pregnancy center near me, as someone who might need these services and had heard that name might Google. The closest one is in Burnsville. I'm not gonna say the name of the organization, it's a women's center, and I started just browsing the website like anyone might do who might be in a situation where they would need the services they think are here. And the website touts free services, pregnancy consultations, testings, medical consultations, but I couldn't get any actual information on the website. It kept funneling me to a link to set up an appointment, set up an appointment, set up an appointment. And it never specified if there were going to be medical professionals on site or not. It just said, make an appointment. So I wanted to find out, like, what does this Women's Center do if you make these appointments? So I clicked the only thing available on the website, which is an About Us page. And I want to read you what it says there. We are here for you. This Women's Center is committed to providing free services, education, and practical support to anyone who lives in or near Burnsville and Dakota County. Our compassionate approach is what we aim to be known for because women facing unexpected or unsupported pregnancies deserve the best care available. Whether you are looking for information on abortion, pregnancy, sexual health, or parenting, you deserve a non-judgmental, remember that word, safe space to sort through your decisions and testing results. As a 501c3 nonprofit in Minnesota providing free services, we do not profit from your reproductive health decisions. Contact us to learn more. So that, there's nothing terrible in that description as much as it's worth. It sounds like a good place to get medical advice. But I wanted to find out more, couldn't find anything about their board of directors on their website, couldn't find out anything about who was working there, anything along those sorts. But I did see that it was a 501c3, and I'm on the taxes committee, so I know that means they have a 990. So I looked up the 990, I printed it off. One of the first questions in the summary says, briefly describe the organization's mission or most significant activities. Remember what I just read to you, what is public, what someone who's looking for services would read and think is going on in this center. But in their 990, their mission is described. It is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and to protect and advocate for the sanctity of all human life, born and unborn, through the provision of abortion alternative services that empower mothers to choose life. That's what you're asking us to fund. It's a crisis pregnancy center, and this kind of practice happens a lot. And listen, religious convictions are something that you are allowed to have in our society. This organization is completely legal. I'm not saying that they're doing anything illegal here in setting up this nonprofit. And in fact, in some ways, the government and the state helps these organizations. It's a nonprofit. People can donate to them, get tax exemptions, all kinds of things. I remember growing up, we used to fill up baby bottles with change for our local crisis pregnancy center when I was growing up in an evangelical church. And I'm sure many people in this room have done that. But the question is public dollars. Do we want it to go to these sort of organizations? I didn't cherry pick this. If you think I'm cherry picking this, seriously, go Google and find the closest pregnancy center. It is this one, and you'll find all of this to be accurate. The question is are crisis pregnancy centers helpful in maintaining a safe and healthy Minnesota? I would say clearly it is not. If you want another example of that, let's go to a state that allows this, and allows this overwhelmingly, Texas. Texas, in the fiscal year 2023, gave $140 million to crisis pregnancy centers out of their public funds. Did it help them be healthier? Their women, children, infants born. If you look at infant mortality rates for that same year, Minnesota, under current law where we don't do that, actually ranks much higher. Our infant mortality rate is 4.5 per 1,000. Texas's is 5.72, with all of that money going to this crisis pregnancy centers. These don't work. Many times they're religiously motivated, which is fine for a nonprofit, but is not fine for a taxpayer-funded grant. This is not the best use of our resources. It's not the best use of improving the health of our women, our children, our non-binary people, anyone who can give birth in this state. Please vote no on this bill.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Herr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I actually wasn't going to get up and speak today. I know everybody says that, but really I've been trying to stay true to that. But I couldn't help myself because I heard a lot being said by my GOP colleagues across the aisle, and talking about demonizing and how they're characterizing people who choose to have abortions. And I felt like it was really important for me to stand up and speak about my own abortion story. and that I was very young when my husband and I first got married, and we were pregnant, and all I had ever wanted being raised as a young woman is to be his wife and to have his children. And I didn't know what to expect or what to think of. It was my first pregnancy, and if you come from a culture like mine, we do not talk about sex, we do not talk about pregnancy, even though we want you to have as many kids as possible. And so when I started spotting, I didn't know what to do, and I ended up going to a crisis pregnancy center. Well, first I went to a doctor who I don't know, and I'm so young, and I wish I would have asked more questions back then, and I was college educated, and I didn't know to ask. And I asked, and they told me that I was pregnant, and I was spotting potentially because I had an ectopic pregnancy. I didn't even know back then what an ectopic pregnancy was. They didn't explain it to me. There was no Googling. And so they told me, we're sorry, and you're probably going to have a miscarriage. And so I didn't want to experience that. I didn't want to figure out where that would lead me. And so I started looking to see in the yellow pages back then who I could go to for help. And I ended up at a crisis pregnancy center who encouraged me to try to keep my baby, even though and maybe I didn't use the right words back then. Again, I was only in my early 20s, and they encouraged me to keep this pregnancy, and I just thought something wasn't right. And I ended up going to an abortion clinic, and it was nothing the way Representative Zalesnikar explained it to be, and that was over 30 years ago. I literally sat in that room and I cried because I did not know if that was the right decision for me. And these people in this abortion clinic said, we cannot give you an abortion because you look like you are conflicted. And they wanted to give me the resources to be able to understand what to do with myself. And I ended up deciding that an abortion was the best thing for me. And I look back now, and the shame that I carried because somebody told me I should carry this pregnancy, and that I didn't actually share my story, and my parents never knew until I told my story 2 years ago when I was 50 years old. We cannot continue to support organizations that do not give people true medical advice. And I want to bring this back to the amendment that I had, because I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that these organizations will not be eligible for these grants if they refer women to an abortion provider for an abortion. That if your life depended on it, this organization could not refer you to somebody else to give you additional services. That is what you are supporting with this bill. And like Andy, I did as a tax person, I looked up a bunch of 990s, and I really tried hard to figure out financially what they were doing when they talk about these programs about housing support and supporting a baby after it is born. I saw very, very little. Most of the funding that goes to the organizations went to salary, went to paying rent, there was very little in programming. So I don't know what you are referring to when you are saying that they're providing all of these wraparound supports for women who are pregnant. And so members, I do just want to draw you back to this specific line that you did not vote for my amendment, which means now you are telling people that they should be going to facilities who, one, will not give them medical advice, true sound medical advice, but they won't even refer, they can't even speak of it if I see a woman is in need of life-saving medical attentions. Member, please vote against this bill.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I rise in opposition of House File 25, right? Yes, 25. There are many reasons that I don't support these crisis pregnancy centers. You have heard many of my colleagues share beautifully, vulnerably about many of those reasons. But I want to share another reason that I don't support this bill, and that's because crisis pregnancy centers don't need our money. They're fine. They actually have a lot of money. I also looked up some of these tax reports. You know, we do our research, we get our data on our side, and I think it's really important for us to recognize there is actually like $1 billion industry in the United States that funds more than 5,000 pregnancy centers, crisis pregnancy centers across the country, and they're all doing okay. So whatever you think about these crisis pregnancy centers, you might think that they are designed specifically to trick women and queer people into getting into a space to avoid them getting the abortion services they're looking for. Or maybe you think that these places are dangerous, unregulated, non-medical service providers with no HIPAA protections and no real fundamental understanding of the services they're providing. Maybe that's what you think about them. Or maybe you think that they are part of an extremist, patriarchal, right-wing religious agenda to spread the gospel through what I don't even understand how that would work. We know what the missions are. Thank you, Representative Smith. The mission of these organizations, and I've looked at many of these as well, and I have visited them, and I have visited Planned Parenthood, and I appreciate all the medical care Planned Parenthood has provided me, and many other women and queer people across the country. We know what these places are. We know what they do. They say it. Spread the gospel. Spreading the gospel is not providing pregnancy care. You may think that those are the same things, but they're not the same thing. So whatever you think, they're deceptive, they are extremist, they are non-medical, maybe one of those, maybe all three of those, we should all be able to agree they don't even need our money. They're fine. They have plenty of money. Money is going to be hard to come by, I think, during this budget season. I think we're going to have to think really long and hard about how we want to spend it. And giving it to very well-funded, extremist, non-medical organizations deceiving our neighbors is a pretty big waste of money. So please vote no.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support House File 25. When I first got elected in 2011, coming from Wright County and a pro-lifer, my goal, or at least what I claimed I wanted to do, is to defund Planned Parenthood with taxpayer dollars. And speaking to Representative Abler, Jim Abler was on health care. I was on health care, finance, and policy reform. And he said, no, Joe, sit down. You're a freshman. Sit down and shut up. I said, why? What do you mean? He said, we have a very important program called Positive Alternatives that many Democrats have supported for many years. And it does beautiful, great things in Minnesota, all over the state. Now, we had Governor Dayton at the time. We had the House majority of Republicans, the Senate, for the first time in 40-some years, Republicans. So we thought us pro-lifers had a really good opportunity. We still fought for life. But we realized there that the positive alternatives, that many politicians on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, that worked together because they did see how good it did to help women. I don't know what you're talking about on your pregnancy centers and what centers you viewed or visited, but nothing can be further from the truth that they are truly doing the work in helping women and men in need. It was a very, very important mission, and many Democrats supported it. Matter of fact, in 2022, Minnesota was named by Governor Dayton, or let's see, excuse me, Madam Speaker. I guess I'll have to go on memory. In 2022, August 10th, an article came out that Governor Walz claimed and said that Minnesota was the third best state in the nation to raise a baby. One of the key factors was that we took care of those pregnant mothers and the new mothers and fathers who had nowhere to turn to. We helped them all over the state, and we continue to do so. Us Republicans back in 2011 and 12, we fought and we tried to protect our pro-life movement. But we knew then that no one would ever get rid of positive alternatives, that funding would not be repealed until you had the trifecta. And then you repealed it. For 17 years, Republicans and Democrats who realized the value of life to protect women and children and babies was important until just 2 years ago. Governor Walz says that he wants Minnesota to be the best place to raise children and families. And these pregnancy centers do just that to people that are in great need. According to the Minnesota Department of Health, incidentally, that's our agency, their report on maternity homes in 2022 did this to help those in need. Since January 21 until its death that you guys voted on, the grants went out to 27 nonprofit organizations across 31 states. In those grants process from 2016 to 2020, over 32,000 women received services from pregnancy centers funded by those grants. They were able to help out 1,739 women get a car seat and attend a car seat safety program. 2,620 women received infant sleep safety education. 1,747 women who did not have a crib were provided a safe crib for their infants. Wouldn't you agree that's an important, very important mission? 1,624 women received shaken baby prevention education. And 1,527 women received child abuse prevention information. We have one of these pregnancy centers in Wright County. Several of us from Wright County have visited that center. They do beautiful work, very important work. And they have trained, licensed nurses on staff all times to help women and men. To say that this is a deception and misleading and deceiving, and call this, one of your members said it's a misleading Women's Act. I sure wish we'd quit talking like that. When we talk like that on this House floor, that's misleading. No matter how, if you like the bill or not, if you disagree with the Republicans or Democrats, that kind of talk is so misleading and deceiving and deceiving. We ought not to talk like that on the House floor, especially, members, on such an important issue that touches the souls of all of us. I just hope and pray that any one of you on that side, we need just one common sense person that will stand up and vote to protect women and babies, children and men. One vote. Sure would be nice in my 14 years or 15 years now to see at least someone on that side to join us in helping these pregnancy centers and helping women and mothers and children in the most deepest, darkest times of their need. They're doing some great things. I think you've been deceived in what these pregnancy centers do. Perhaps what they did back then, that this is now. Now they are helping women. They're helping babies. They're helping life. They're helping Minnesotans. And they're helping Minnesota become the best state to raise a baby. And we'll continue to do that we'll continue to do that, period. But we'll even do it better if you support this bill. Madam Speaker, thank you.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson J.
Thank you. Members, I hear this claim that this is supposedly about respecting the full spectrum of choices that are protected by our Constitution and our laws. But I do find it disingenuous to both use the frame of this being a pro-choice proposal while also asking to grant taxpayer funds to organizations who would be explicitly prohibited from receiving those funds if they are open, honest, and transparent about the full spectrum of options available in Minnesota. Instead, these grant recipients will be required by statute to lie, deceive, and mislead vulnerable people in crisis, despite the person's legal and constitutional rights to their choice of options. The gag orders specifically in this bill outright encourage hiding the truth of all options that are available for those who are in crisis and pregnant. So aside from the contradiction that I personally see in the frame of the pro-choice piece of this claim, I'm going to be a no vote on this for a few key and important reasons, among others. First, these orgs often refuse to support people simply because of who they are. And under this bill, they can choose if they want to refuse support based on religious or ideological beliefs. So a bill that's seeking to support women won't support all women or people, because these orgs may withdraw or stop offering their support if they find out that someone seeking their support is queer, non-binary, two-spirit, an immigrant, an atheist, agnostic, different, or a different religion than them. Someone that is different is not unworthy. And just because their religion or their organization may deem someone's identity or existence on this planet sinful, unworthy, or immoral, should not restrict them from accessing a service from taxpayer dollars that are not reflective of their constitutional and legal rights. Secondly, I will be a no vote on this bill because these organizations are directed to come up with their own way to protect data, which I find interesting. And it's mentioned that it should be in accordance with health data, even though these are not health clinics, which is further misleading to the public. The gag clause here limits the org from getting this money and from even referring people to the actual medical services that most actual medical facilities offer as a full spectrum of choices. I've never seen a medical provider or a facility who offers abortions turn around and refuse to offer or refer services for non-abortion services. But evidently what's good for the goose is not good for the gander here. Third, I will be voting no on this because I find it wrong to use taxpayer money to require and allow these orgs to exploit people's crisis and state of desperation as an opportunity to take advantage of their vulnerability and their trust and to mislead them about the full spectrum of choices available to them by law and by our Constitution right here in Minnesota. And lastly, I'm going to be a no vote here because of my own experience at one of these centers in Burnsville, ironically enough. When I was 17, I was pregnant, scared, and in crisis. I needed help telling my parents. I needed help getting prenatal care. I needed help securing baby products. I needed help finding a job, finishing school because I had dropped out, and making a plan for my future as a mom, AKA everything that these organizations claim to offer. I was not seeking or even considering an abortion. I had to find a ride to this place because I didn't have a license or a car. I went in alone, and I was terrified. I could barely even breathe sitting in that waiting room. But I knew I needed help and that my baby needed me to find and get that help. I was asked a series of questions, including my religious views, my sexuality, and my plan for my pregnancy. I answered them honestly because I felt like it was important to do that, and I thought I was at a medical clinic and wanted to provide them honest information. The person took the clipboard with the form on it, looked at my form, looked up, gave me a very dirty and intimidating look that I will never forget, And she said, "I'll be right back." She returned a few moments later and handed me a pamphlet about fetal development and said, "Here you go." I assumed they'd be back again soon for the rest of this appointment I was supposedly getting, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And finally, somebody came back out to the front desk, and she said, "Oh, you're still here." I said, "Yes, I'm still here. I'm just waiting to talk about the rest of the supports that I was looking for." And she said, first she looked at me like I had 3 heads, and she said, "Oh, honey, that's all the help that we can do for people like you. But we hope that everything goes great. Best of luck to you." And I left feeling humiliated, embarrassed, because I didn't understand where I was supposed to go from there. I hadn't told my parents, I was beginning to show, I hadn't gotten prenatal care, and I was 6 months pregnant. They had offered me a pamphlet of the services that they offered, and so I was really confused because why didn't I get them? If this is what they did, and this was what their mission was, what did I do wrong? Did I fill out the form wrong? I was a child, and I had no adult with me to help guide me on what I could have done differently, and I beat myself up about it for a while. I finally got the nerve to go to another place to try to get help, and thankfully my next visit was to Planned Parenthood, where I was connected to every single resource that I needed to take care of myself and my unborn child that I was so excited to bring into this world. I got prenatal care within days. I was given free prenatal vitamins. I got information about it was a copy, of What to Expect When You're Expecting, which I had never even seen that book, but it was really important to me because I had no adult around me to talk about this. I got support in learning about what I needed to learn to be a good mom. I learned how to breastfeed and how to prepare to bring my amazing little girl into the world. They also gave me tools and helped me tell my parents. So at 7.5 months pregnant, at 17 years old, I finally told my parents and got their support. So thankfully, Planned Parenthood saved my life and helped me figure out all of the information I needed. It's because of them that I stand before you today as a teen mom, turned first-generation college graduate, a homeowner, an independent and sole breadwinner for my family, and a successful professional, thanks to them. But no thanks to the Crisis Center who turned me away because of who I am. So perhaps if their proposed mission were to actually support all women, I would be standing before you today telling you a different story. But I'm not, because that is not their actual mission. Most of these centers are the same. I later discovered, as Representative Smith mentioned today, that this particular center their mission was to actively look for people who wanted to give their children up for adoption, and they were outspoken in the community about their homophobia. These exclusionary versions of Christian beliefs hurt because I was on the cusp of being born again, just like so many of these centers seek to do. It wasn't because of them that I found my way back to church. They actually put me the other way. Thankfully, somebody else did. So this is not rhetoric. This is not slanderous. My story is real. Chair Gomez's story is real. Chair Hur's story is real. Everybody who shares stories like this are real, but it does not surprise me that the Crisis Center's sympathizers and supporters would ignore our true lived experience of concerns about this bill because it was never actually about supporting all women. It was never actually about empowering all women with the choices that they are constitutionally entitled to in this state. It was never about supporting all women as they are, where they are, with what they need, from a place of integrity and sincerity. It's always been about restricting choice, using deceit as it's wanted, judging people for who they are, and discriminating in the public sector with public dollars in the name of religion. The best thing to take away from today's discussion is that, traumatic or wrong or not, the services that I and others went to these crisis centers to get were unnecessary because there were other people who stepped up and did the work, licensed medical professionals who connected me to real services that I needed, that made real change, that put me on a path to stand before you on the Minnesota State House floor and tell this story like so many teen moms and single parents would never get the opportunity to do. So I am glad that those services were offered to me from a place of honor and integrity, full disclosure and science, and whose actions prove that they actually support all women who are making all kinds of choices at all levels of urgency, because that is the right thing to do. Vote no, members.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to cover a couple of things that have been said and just refute them. Representative Finke mentioned that these centers don't need our money. Well, news flash, neither does Planned Parenthood, and we fund them. Let's learn about them. In 2023, the annual report, this is from the Lozier Institute, Planned Parenthood reported nearly $2.1 billion in income and over $2.5 billion in net assets, an increase from the previous report. $997.5 million came from private contributions, up 44% from the previous report. Doesn't sound like they need our money. Taxpayer funding from the form of government grants, contracts, and Medicaid reimbursement hit $699.3 million, or almost $2 million per day, making up 34% of Planned Parenthood's overall revenue. Planned Parenthood's taxpayer funding has increased by 43% since 2010. Maybe we should think about not giving them money, Representative Finke. Doesn't sound like they need it. And let's talk about data and how it's held. If you just do a simple Google search of Planned Parenthood data breaches, you'll find several. One of the most recent was hackers threatened to leak Planned Parenthood data from September of 2024. So, over 300,000 devices were compromised that had multiple Planned Parenthood patient data on them. If we go back, you'll see that there have been class action lawsuits, there's been ransomware with Planned Parenthood, and there was something on here about Los Angeles. There was a really huge data breach there. Let's see, I think it was 400,000 people, patients' names were compromised at Planned Parenthood in Los Angeles. Yeah, here it is. 400,000. So let's talk about the safety of people's information. Planned Parenthood is a much larger corporation than these small, community-centered crisis pregnancy centers. And I am sorry to hear of the bad experiences that some of you are reporting and experienced. That's heartbreaking to me because the crisis pregnancy centers that I know of, that is not the way they treat people. And for every bad story that we've heard today, I've heard 5 or 6 or more stories of how these centers have helped people. Parenting classes, teaching them the basics of taking care of a baby. Because, like Representative Hansen, many of these are young women that don't have a lot of, they've never had to do this before. They're very young. Members, I've been here 16 years, and I've been here for some really harsh and difficult conversations, but I've never experienced anything like today and the demonization of people that want to do good in their communities and help women and men in crisis. I've had to get up and leave several times. I've just never heard such hatred toward these folks. And as was said on the previous bill, because there's one bad actor, do we throw out all of them and put them all in one negative bin? And that's not the way we should be thinking. These centers do a lot of good for a lot of people. Representative McDonald read off some statistics about how many women they help, about how many car seats they give out, about how many cribs they give out. I've been to their banquets. I've heard the stories of people that have been helped. So I know they are doing good. And I can't abide by the villainization of these folks. I think it's wrong, and I think it's ugly, what has been said here today.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. I know it's been a long conversation, and I just want to point out that several people have said that these organizations do not deserve public funding. And I find that really concerning. First of all, they received public funding with strong bipartisan support for 17 years. And the idea then was, because we provide funding to Planned Parenthood and abortion providers, we would balance that by providing funding to positive alternatives to abortion through crisis pregnancy centers. And that was a consensus that I think Minnesotans still generally support. So, but it was said, well, they don't need the money. They can just fundraise. Well, why isn't that true of Planned Parenthood? We give $24 million a year to Planned Parenthood of state taxpayer dollars. This is for $8 million. So already it's a huge imbalance, but I would certainly support my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. If you're willing to stop state funding for Planned Parenthood, I would agree, and we should just not give money to crisis pregnancy centers. But if we're going to give money to Planned Parenthood, we should provide the positive alternatives. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as of Monday, we will officially be back to a tie in the State House. But rather than acknowledge this reality and begin working with us, the GOP is bringing up partisan divisive bills. Minnesotans want us to protect reproductive rights. More than 70% of Minnesotans support legal abortion, including big majorities in every single part of this state. It was said on the last bill that this used to be a bipartisan issue. Well, guess what? It still is, just not in the way you think. Politicians who want to outlaw abortion have increasingly sought to use public funding to fund crisis pregnancy centers. I used to live across the street from a crisis pregnancy center. It did everything it could to look like a medical clinic. It had a big sign out front, had a little red cross out there, but it wasn't. Make no mistake, these centers fake being women's health clinics to fool women into walking in. Staff or volunteers often wear medical coats or scrubs and falsely present themselves as healthcare providers, as you heard from Representative Gomez. Then they provide medically inaccurate information to the individuals they've tricked. They don't have health and safety standards. Because most of them don't have medical professionals, they aren't subject to patient privacy laws, including HIPAA. That puts at risk the privacy of individuals who come into the centers. The centers are not providing comprehensive reproductive care, as you heard from Representative Heintzeman. Planned Parenthood has been brought up a lot today, and I have the privilege of having a Planned Parenthood center in my district. In Minneapolis alone, they provide 2,300 birth control appointments, 400 annual exams, 3,500 STI visits. So let's not mischaracterize what these centers are doing. Crisis pregnancy centers can do real harm, providing inaccurate information that can lead to delays in medical care or pretending to provide medical advice when there is not licensed medical practitioner on site. They can endanger women by misrepresenting or misinterpreting medical evidence, as you heard from Representative Herr. Let's talk about choice. Anyone seeking healthcare services should be provided with unbiased, medically accurate information. As the American Medical Association puts it, the patient's right to self-decision can be effectively exercised only if the patient possesses enough information to enable uninformed choice. Manipulating information is a tactic used by those opposed to reproductive rights to try to influence the decision of women. This is not only unethical from a medical standpoint, it is often dangerous. Minnesotans should be trusted to make private healthcare decisions with accurate information in consultation with actual medical professionals. Crisis pregnancy centers do not need or deserve state funding. Vote no.
Recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. House File 25 is a bill that restores fairness after the DFL's one-sided attack on pregnancy resource centers, an attack that we've seen continue in the discussion tonight. For 17 years, these centers received bipartisan support until last session, when Democrats on a partisan vote eliminated their funding entirely. It's time to correct this injustice and make sure women and families have real choices, not just the ones that Minnesota Democrats approve of. Last year, Democrats cut every dollar from the Positive Alternatives program while handing abortion providers, not unbiased sources, millions more in funding. That's not pro-choice. That's one choice, abortion only. True choice means offering women real alternatives, not funneling them into one path. When Democrats fund organizations that only provide or refer for abortions while actively defunding maternity homes and pregnancy centers, it's clear where their priorities lie. House File 25 simply reinstates funding that existed for nearly 2 decades, funding that provides housing, counseling, parenting classes, and material support to women who choose life. Minnesota already spends millions of dollars for abortion-related services while refusing to spend a single dollar on alternatives. That's not fairness. That's not choice. That's a political agenda. Pregnancy centers and maternity homes provide critical, life-changing support to those who seek it. The real question is, why are Democrats so determined to silence and defund any group that doesn't align with their ideology? For 17 years, both parties agreed that women deserve access to a full range of pregnancy support until last year, when that bipartisan consensus was shattered. House File 25 simply restores that bipartisan consensus. If Democrats truly believed in choice, they would support this bill. Members, I urge you to support House File 25. Let's stand for real choice. Let's vote green.
I recognize the author of the bill, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We've had a lot of discussion, and I appreciate hearing the statements and the comments and the experiences from both sides of the aisle. At the end of the day, I think it's important for members to remember that for 17 years, before I came here, and maybe before some of you came here, but we do have members that were here on both sides of the aisle when this was a bipartisan discussion. Unfortunately, it changed 2 years ago. Minnesotans didn't change, this body changed. And I think it's important that we return to that same spirit of bipartisanship, because that's really what Minnesotans want. The bill gives women options, and it's really simple. But right now, I want to talk about some things that were said. Unregulated. Unregulated was said. The reality is, Democrats rejected regulations for settings like Planned Parenthood who do invasive medical procedures. They didn't want licensing in those settings. When we offered that, you said no. Positive alternative grants through places like a pregnancy resource center and a maternity home are not doing invasive medical procedures. The second thing is, I heard people say, we're not licensed. That's true in the sense that the buildings aren't licensed on either side, for either side of the grants that we fund. It's true at Planned Parenthood and it's true at the resource centers. But what they didn't tell you is that every single professional licensed person is licensed. The RN, the doctor, the medical director. I have been to these settings and they have that. They are as equally licensed as the ones that are in Planned Parenthood. Second, maternity homes I heard were never funded. That's like a new thing in this bill. Well, that's not true either. Members, we funded through this body maternity homes. The Philomena home in this city of St. Paul lost $149,790 because the grant is a multiple year grant, 4-year grant, I believe. It ended. Real loss to real women. North Maternity in Duluth lost $72,023 of their grant in a maternity home. In Hibbing, in northern Minnesota, they lost $148,046. That's just facts. We funded them before. So I heard about, let's not deceive people, then let's tell them the truth. This is not a new thing. It was going on for 17 years from this chamber. Number 3, let's talk about monitoring. I heard people say of their experiences, but in 2005, when this program started, there was a lot of due diligence done. Because you know what? They put third-party compliance for pregnancy resource centers, where they were audited by foundations like the Wilder Foundation. People that were pro-choice audited these places and said they were super impressed. Are the same auditings happening at Planned Parenthood? Auditing has happened from 2005 to 2017, or 2023, for 17 years. So when you ask yourself if your experience, I'm sorry if you had an experience that was different, but I'm talking about from 2005, when we had grants that have compliance with the Minnesota Department of Health reviewing, to 2023. Number 4, records. I heard that there's no confidentiality. That's just not true either. That's in the bill. If you read the bill, you saw it. We talked about that at committee, of confidentiality and records. We don't want records to not have that, and we don't want breach of records for any organization that we're giving money. We talked about settings. The settings seem different. I think you're going to find scrubs. I think you're going to find paperwork. I think you're going to find magazines and seating, whether you go to Planned Parenthood or you go to a pregnancy resource center. And when the doctors are there, you're likely going to see a stethoscope. That's just absolutely insanely ridiculous to make statements like that. Grant applications, number 7 that I'm going to talk about. They have grant applications right in the contract for these that talk about the conditions and the terms. That was from 2005 to 2023. There was actual wording in there for everybody to have clear guidelines so that some of the things you were talking about would not happen. And I'm not aware of any that have happened in that time frame. We talked about pregnancy resource centers not needing the money. Okay, well, we had 77 pregnancy resource centers in 2023. We have 73 now. 77 to 73, so 4 have clearly closed. And you're right. People will give money, whether they're giving money to the sexual and reproductive health grants. We just heard 990s. Billions are in that organization. And so, yes, people will give to make sure that women have options. But let's be truthful on both sides of it. Because the funding exists in the sexual and reproductive health grants for $25 million from the state of Minnesota. It exists. This bill for positive alternative grants has never taken away money for abortions, to get birth control, to get the services that are done there. What it took away is car seats, clothing, diapers, supplies. I've been to them. There's just rooms full of it. That's what it took away. It took away ultrasounds, not an invasive procedure. That's what it took away from women in Minnesota. It's unfortunate that was a simple bipartisan decision for 17 years has become political, because Minnesotans, 80% of them agree with exactly what I wrote in this bill. Just let us make the decision. The reality is women do not need government to arbitrarily limit choice and options for women. So this isn't about abortion. Abortion's fully funded, same as it's been. So tell the truth and be honest to Minnesotans. What's not funded is the alternative options for women. That's the truth. And yeah, there's been some egregious misallocation of funds, but not in the category of pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes. I haven't heard one claim of that in the state of Minnesota. But I've heard about $600 million of misallocated funds and fraud. But it hasn't been here. And we have a fraud committee in the state of Minnesota now, as of 2025, that would be hearing that, should that ever be a reality. But the fact is, the system had controls to have audits for compliance. Members, there was safeguards for 17 years. There was common sense for 17 years. It is that simple. It is simply giving women options. Women are not naive. Every one of us have this phone to find out what's in a 20-second radius, a 20-mile radius, to pick. I don't need the government to tell me, and I don't think anybody else does either. Nobody's forcing. The contracts are pretty clear. I've read them. It's a supportive service on both sides of the aisle. And nothing changes with this bill, members. What this bill does is give women options. Members, let's restore what happened for 17 years. That's what Minnesota expects us to do. This is about as bipartisan as it gets. It's not taking away from anything, it's adding. Members, vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 65 nays, the bill does not pass. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Quam moves that House Law number 561 be recalled from the Committee on Transportation, Finance, and Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety, Finance, and Policy.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For some reason, this was sent to the wrong committee. Two other UAV bills are in the public safety, and this would be heard at the same time, and I ask that it be moved. Thank you.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Bonner moves that House File Number 1268 be recalled from the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law and be re-referred to the Committee on Commerce, Finance, and Policy.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. Yes, that is my motion to move House File 1268, have it recalled from the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law, and be re-referred to the Committee on Commerce, Finance, and Policy, where it needs to take a stop before it can go back. That is my motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Olson moves that House File Number 1532 be recalled from the Committee on State Government, Finance, and Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations.
And members, please take your conversations to the alcoves or to the retiring room. I recognize the member from Martin, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. This bill has to do with eminent domain and some reimbursement amounts for assessments, and so it was inadvertently sent to State Gov when it should be sent to Elections, Finance, and Government Operations. Spoken to both chairs, and they agree to it, so I'd appreciate a yes vote.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Gordon moves that House File Number 1849 be recalled from the Committee on State Government, Finance, and Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Elections, Finance, and Government Operations.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative. I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. This is a bill that would create term limits for the governor and lieutenant governor, and I've spoken with both committees, and they're on board.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Van Binsbergen moves that House File Number 1461 be returned to its author.
I recognize the member from Chippewa, Representative Van Binsbergen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. I would like these bills returned at this point.
All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails.
Van Binsbergen moves that House File Number 1462 be returned to its author.
I recognize the member from Chippewa, Representative Van Binsbergen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is my motion. At this point, I'd like those bills returned.
All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Got it. I recognize members. Please take your conversations to the alcoves or the retiring room. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'd like to announce that Sovereignty Day will be Monday, March 17th. The House has hosted this a number of times. The Senate is in charge this year, so you might not have gotten as much notice as you would have gotten if the House were still in charge of it. But the event starts on Monday the 17th at 8:30 in the morning for those who are awake and present at that time with coffee and bagels. There is a lunch from 11:30 to 12:30 for legislators and tribal leaders. Please know that tribal government leaders come from all over the state. For most of them, it is a pretty hefty drive to get here, and they are giving their time to educate both the House and the Senate on how tribal governments work and where they are, and lots of issues about the law in Minnesota and federal law and how it impacts our sovereign tribal nations in the state of Minnesota. So I hope that you will attend as much of Sovereignty Day on Monday, March 17th as you can. I'm having the schedule distributed to you so that you can figure out how to fit that into your day. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Over 30 years ago, physicist Larry Shaw celebrated the first Pi Day on March 14th, which is tomorrow. The date 3.14 was meant to signify the first 3 digits of pi, the ratio of the circle's circumference to its diameter. And a bit of serendipity, it's also Albert Einstein's birthday. So I want to leave you with 3 science-themed quotes. It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. That was Albert Einstein. So regardless of the skills or the knowledge that we come with, may we spend the time and effort to solve problems for Minnesotans. And also then from Ada Lovelace, your best and wisest refuge from all troubles is in your science. Learning is a beautiful thing. May we find the refuge during challenging times in learning and during this session. And lastly, to close, happy Pi Day. Here's to being irrational.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Heintzeman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. So, yes, to echo Representative Jones, happy early Pi Day. We often abbreviate the number pi to 3.14, hence March 14th. Some other fun facts. Yes, it is an irrational number. It's also never ending. It goes on to infinity, so that's why we like to shorten it up a little bit. And if you're ever looking for a symbol of it, you can kind of think of Stonehenge, so the 2 little legs and the little rounded top. So just wanted to extend our nerdiness a little bit, and now hopefully every March 14th you will recognize as Pi Day. In the retiring room, I hope you're able to grab a slice, but we brought pies today from Dorothy Ann Bakery and Keys Cafe, both in Woodbury, just to kind of celebrate the day. So thank you very much.
Representative Niska. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, March 17, 2025.
Representative Niska moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, March 17, 2025. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Representative Niska.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Niska moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Monday, March 17th, 2025.